I stared at the email on my screen, reading it for the third time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. The quarterly bonus distribution list was out, and my name was conspicuously absent from it. After 18 months of consistently exceeding my targets at Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Chicago, I had expected to see my name right there with the rest of the high performers. My cubicle sat in the middle of the bustling office floor, surrounded by the constant hum of phone calls, keyboard clicks, and the occasional burst of laughter from the break room. The November rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in a gray, dreary light that seemed to match my mood perfectly. I had been with the company since graduating from Northwestern, and this was supposed to be my breakthrough quarter. "Audrey, you okay?" Jessica, my cubicle neighbor, leaned over the partition. Her concerned expression told me that my disappointment was written all over my face. "Just processing some news," I replied, minimizing the email window. Jessica was sweet, but office gossip traveled faster than wildfire here, and I needed to understand what had happened before word got out. I spent the rest of the morning going through my files, double-checking my performance metrics. The numbers were undeniable. I had brought in 3 major clients in the past quarter alone, generating over $200,000 in new revenue. My client retention rate was 97%, the highest in my department. There had to be some mistake. During lunch, I decided to approach my supervisor, Marcus Henley. Marcus was in his late 40s, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, with salt and pepper hair that he kept perfectly styled. He had been with Morrison & Associates for over a decade and had a reputation for being demanding but fair. At least, that's what I had believed until today. I found him in his corner office, the one with the view of the Chicago River. He was on the phone, gesturing animatedly while pacing behind his mahogany desk. When he saw me through the glass door, he held up one finger, indicating I should wait. 5 minutes later, he opened the door with his usual practice smile. "Audrey, what can I do for you?" "I wanted to discuss the bonus distribution," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. "I noticed my name wasn't on the list, and I'm hoping you can help me understand why." Marcus's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "Come in. Close the door." The office smelled of expensive coffee and leather. Marcus settled behind his desk, and I took the chair across from him, the same one where I had received praise for my work just weeks earlier. "Look, Audrey," he began, his tone suddenly formal. "The bonus decisions are based on overall performance evaluations, not just sales numbers. There are multiple factors we consider." "Such as?" I asked, genuinely curious. "My client satisfaction scores are excellent. I've never missed a deadline, and my revenue numbers speak for themselves." Marcus shifted in his chair, avoiding direct eye contact. "Well, there have been some concerns about your team collaboration and initiative-taking. Some feedback suggested you might not be as proactive as we need for this level of recognition." I felt a flush of heat rise in my cheeks. "I'm sorry, but I have to disagree. I've led 3 team projects this quarter, including the Henderson campaign that won us the account. I've stayed late countless nights to support my colleagues when they were overwhelmed." "I understand your frustration," Marcus said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my stomach turn. "But the decision has been made. I'd encourage you to focus on areas for improvement moving forward." I left his office feeling more confused than when I had entered. The feedback he described didn't match my experience at all. In fact, just last month, Sarah from the creative team had specifically thanked me for jumping in to help with the Michaels account when she was swamped with other projects. That afternoon, I found myself replaying every interaction I'd had with Marcus over the past few months. There had been a subtle shift in his behavior toward me, starting around the time I had been assigned to work on the Preston Industries account, one of the firm's biggest clients. I had presented a comprehensive strategy that had impressed the client so much they had increased their contract by 30%. As I packed up my things at the end of the day, I made a decision. If Marcus wasn't going to give me straight answers, I would find them myself. I had always been thorough in my work, keeping detailed records of everything. If there were performance issues I wasn't aware of, they would be documented somewhere. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt longer than usual. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and I could hear the mechanical whir of the building's ventilation system. I thought about calling my sister Emma, who worked in HR at a company in Milwaukee, but decided to wait until I had more information. That night, in my one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, I spread my work files across my dining table. The space was small but cozy, with exposed brick walls and large windows that overlooked the tree-lined street. I had bought a bottle of wine earlier, thinking I'd be celebrating my bonus. Instead, I poured myself a glass and began methodically going through every piece of documentation from the past quarter. What I found was exactly what I expected: stellar performance reviews, client testimonials, and project completion records that painted a picture of someone who was not only meeting expectations, but exceeding them significantly. There was nothing in my files that would justify excluding me from the bonus pool. As I sat there, surrounded by evidence of my hard work, I felt a growing sense of injustice. This wasn't just about money, although the bonus would have helped with my student loans and maybe finally allowed me to start saving for a house. This was about recognition, about being valued for the contributions I had made to the company's success. I was going to get to the bottom of this, one way or another. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was quiet, with only a few dedicated early birds scattered across the floors. I used the time to organize my thoughts and plan my approach. If Marcus's feedback about my performance was legitimate, there would be a paper trail. Morrison & Associates was nothing if not thorough about documentation. I started by reaching out to my colleagues, being careful to frame my questions as general inquiries about feedback and improvement opportunities. The responses I received only deepened my confusion. "Are you kidding?" said Tom from the analytics team when I asked if he had any suggestions for how I could be more collaborative. "You're the first person I call when I need help with client presentations. You always make time for everyone." Sarah from Creative was equally puzzled. "Audrey, you literally saved my neck on the Michaels project. If anything, you're too helpful sometimes. I keep telling you that you don't need to take on everyone else's work." By Thursday, I had spoken with nearly a dozen colleagues, and the feedback was universally positive. If anything, the consensus was that I was one of the most reliable and collaborative team members in the department. Either Marcus had received feedback from sources I hadn't considered, or something else was going on. That afternoon, while Marcus was in a client meeting, I decided to take a closer look at the quarterly performance reports. As a senior account manager, I had access to certain departmental files, including aggregate performance data that was used for bonus calculations. The file server was organized by department and quarter, with clear naming conventions that made navigation straightforward. I pulled up the Q3 performance summary for our department and began scrolling through the individual contributor sections. What I saw made me stop breathing for a moment. According to the official report, my revenue numbers were listed as $127,000 for the quarter, significantly lower than the actual $203,000 I had generated. My client retention rate was shown as 82% instead of the actual 97%. Most shocking of all, there were notations about collaboration issues and missed deadlines that were completely fabricated. I printed the report and compared it to my personal records, double and triple checking the numbers. There was no mistake. Someone had deliberately altered my performance data. My hands were shaking as I navigated to the previous quarter's reports. The same pattern emerged. My actual performance had been systematically underreported while my colleagues' numbers appeared accurate. Going back further, I could see that this had been happening for the past 3 quarters, coinciding exactly with when Marcus had been assigned as my direct supervisor. The pieces were starting to come together, but I needed to understand the motive. Why would Marcus want to sabotage my performance reports? I thought about the Preston Industries account, the one where my strategy had led to a significant contract increase. I remembered how Marcus had seemed surprised by the client's positive response, almost as if he had expected a different outcome. I pulled up the client files for Preston Industries and found something interesting. The initial strategy proposal submitted to the client was attributed to Marcus, but it was nearly identical to the presentation I had prepared for him the week before. The only differences were minor formatting changes and the replacement of my name with his in the footer. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what had been happening. Marcus had been taking credit for my work while simultaneously sabotaging my official performance records. It was a calculated campaign to keep me from advancing while he benefited from my contributions. I needed more evidence before I could take this to HR. Accusations of this nature required solid documentation, and I wanted to be absolutely certain of my facts before making any moves. Over the next few days, I carefully gathered additional evidence. I found email threads where Marcus had forwarded my strategy documents to clients without attribution. I discovered meeting notes where he had presented my ideas as his own. Most damning of all, I found backup files on the shared drive that showed the original accurate performance reports before they had been altered. The pattern was clear and undeniable. For months, Marcus had been systematically stealing credit for my work while undermining my official record. The bonus exclusion was just the latest manifestation of this betrayal. On Friday evening, as I sat in my apartment reviewing all the evidence I had collected, I felt a mix of anger and vindication. The anger was obvious. I had been manipulated and cheated by someone I had trusted. But the vindication came from knowing that I hadn't been imagining things, that my work really was as strong as I believed it to be. I thought about confronting Marcus directly, but I knew that would be a mistake. Someone willing to engage in this level of deception would likely just deny everything and potentially destroy evidence. No, this required a more strategic approach. I spent the weekend researching company policies and procedures for reporting misconduct. Morrison & Associates had a clear protocol for these situations, with protections for whistleblowers and a commitment to thorough investigation. The HR department was led by Patricia Collins, a woman with a reputation for fairness and integrity. On Monday morning, I would take everything I had discovered to HR. I had the evidence, I had the documentation, and I had the confidence that comes from knowing you're in the right. Marcus had underestimated me, assuming that I would simply accept his version of events without question. He was about to learn just how wrong he had been. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the first hints of the Chicago winter that was just around the corner. I had spent most of Sunday organizing my evidence into a comprehensive file, complete with timestamps, screenshots, and printed copies of all relevant documents. My presentation was methodical and thorough, the kind of attention to detail that had made me successful in my role. I arrived at the office at 8:30, knowing that Patricia Collins typically got in early. The HR department was located on the 15th floor, 2 floors above my usual workspace. The elevator ride felt interminable, and I found myself rehearsing what I would say, though I had already practiced the conversation a dozen times over the weekend. Patricia's office was at the end of a quiet hallway, with frosted glass doors that provided privacy while still maintaining an open feel. She was a woman in her early 50s, with short auburn hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave her a scholarly appearance. In the 3 years I had been at Morrison & Associates, I had only interacted with her during orientation and the annual benefits meetings, but she had always struck me as someone who listened carefully and spoke thoughtfully. "Audrey," she said with a surprised smile when I knocked on her doorframe. "This is unexpected. Please come in. What can I do for you?" I settled into the chair across from her desk, my folder of evidence in my lap. The office was warm and welcoming, with family photos and plants that suggested someone who cared about creating a comfortable environment. "I need to report some concerns about my supervisor, Marcus Henley," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. "I've discovered evidence that he has been falsifying my performance reports and taking credit for my work." Patricia's expression immediately became more serious. She reached for a legal pad and pen, then looked back at me with focused attention. "Those are serious allegations, Audrey. Tell me what you found." For the next 45 minutes, I walked Patricia through everything I had discovered. I showed her the altered performance reports, the email trails where Marcus had claimed my work as his own, and the backup files that proved the original data had been changed. Patricia took detailed notes, asking clarifying questions and requesting copies of key documents. "This is quite comprehensive," she said when I finished my presentation. "You've clearly put a lot of thought into documenting these concerns. I want you to know that we take allegations of this nature very seriously." She explained the investigation process, emphasizing that there would be strict confidentiality protections and no retaliation tolerance. An independent investigator would review all the evidence, interview relevant parties, and prepare a report with recommendations for action. "In the meantime," Patricia said, "I want you to continue with your regular duties, but I'm going to arrange for you to report directly to Regional Director Janet Morrison while this investigation is ongoing. This will ensure that there's no interference with the process." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. After months of feeling like I was going crazy, questioning my own perceptions and wondering if I was somehow failing without realizing it, it was validating to have someone take my concerns seriously. The rest of the week passed in a strange limbo. Marcus seemed oblivious to the investigation that was beginning, treating me with the same condescending politeness he had shown since excluding me from the bonus. Meanwhile, I found myself working directly with Janet Morrison, a sharp woman in her early 60s who had built the Chicago office from the ground up. Janet was everything Marcus pretended to be: genuinely knowledgeable about the business, supportive of her team, and focused on results rather than politics. Within 2 days of working with her, she had reviewed my actual performance data and expressed amazement at what I had accomplished. "I had no idea you were generating these kinds of numbers," she told me during our first one-on-one meeting. "Marcus's reports suggested you were a solid performer, but nothing like this. These results put you in the top 5% of account managers across all our offices." On Thursday afternoon, Patricia called me back to her office. The investigation had moved quickly, partly because the evidence I had provided was so comprehensive, and partly because the forensic analysis of the computer systems had revealed additional proof of the document alterations. "We've completed our preliminary investigation," Patricia said, her expression grave. "I want you to know that your allegations have been substantiated. Marcus has been suspended pending a final review, and we're implementing immediate changes to ensure this doesn't happen again." She went on to explain that Marcus had admitted to altering the reports when confronted with the digital evidence. His explanation was that he had been under pressure to manage his department's budget and had been trying to delay my advancement to avoid increasing his personnel costs. The theft of credit for my work had been his way of advancing his own career at my expense. "What happens now?" I asked. "Several things," Patricia replied. "First, we're correcting your official performance records to reflect your actual contributions. Second, you'll be receiving the bonuses you should have earned for the past 3 quarters, plus interest. Third, we're offering you Marcus's position on an interim basis, with the opportunity to make it permanent based on your performance." I sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing the magnitude of what she was telling me. In the span of a week, I had gone from feeling like a failure to being offered a promotion to management. "There's one more thing," Patricia continued. "We want to implement some new oversight procedures to prevent this from happening again, and we'd like your input on what those should look like. Your experience with this situation has highlighted some gaps in our systems that we need to address." That evening, I called my sister Emma to share the news. She had been my sounding board throughout the ordeal, listening to my frustrations and encouraging me to trust my instincts. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "It took real courage to speak up, especially when you were being made to feel like the problem was with you." As I hung up the phone, I realized that Emma was right. The hardest part of the entire experience hadn't been gathering evidence or presenting my case to HR. It had been trusting myself when someone in a position of authority was telling me that my perceptions were wrong, that my work wasn't as good as I thought it was. I had learned something valuable about advocacy and self-worth, lessons that would serve me well in whatever came next. 3 months later, I was settling into my new office, the same corner space that had once belonged to Marcus. The view of the Chicago River was just as impressive as I had imagined, but what I appreciated most was the opportunity to lead a team and implement the changes I had envisioned for so long. The transition to management had been challenging but rewarding. I had inherited a department that was demoralized and distrustful, understandably skeptical after learning about Marcus's behavior. My first priority had been rebuilding trust and establishing transparent communication channels. I implemented weekly one-on-one meetings with each team member, created a shared dashboard where everyone could see actual performance metrics, and established a peer feedback system that prevented any single person from controlling someone else's professional narrative. The changes had taken time to implement, but the results were already visible in both morale and productivity. Jessica, my former cubicle neighbor, had become one of my strongest supporters in the new role. During our weekly check-in, she shared something that resonated deeply with me. "You know what I appreciate most about working for you?" she said. "I never have to wonder where I stand. You tell us exactly what you expect. You give us credit for our work, and you help us grow. It's like working in a completely different company." The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus's attempt to sabotage my career had ultimately accelerated it. My experience with the investigation had led to several company-wide policy changes, including mandatory training for managers on ethical leadership and the implementation of anonymous reporting systems for misconduct concerns. Patricia Collins had become an unexpected mentor, checking in regularly and providing guidance as I navigated my new responsibilities. During one of our conversations, she shared something that helped me understand the broader impact of what had happened. "You should know that your case led to a comprehensive review of our promotion and bonus processes," she told me. "We discovered that there had been other instances of performance manipulation, though none as systematic as what Marcus was doing to you. Your willingness to speak up probably helped several other people who didn't even know they were being affected. The financial impact had been significant as well. The back bonuses, combined with my new salary and the promotion bonus, had allowed me to pay off my student loans and make a down payment on a small house in a neighborhood I loved. But more important than the money was the restoration of my professional confidence and the knowledge that my work was valued and recognized. I had also learned valuable lessons about workplace politics and the importance of documentation. I now kept meticulous records of all my work and encouraged my team members to do the same. I had seen firsthand how easily achievements could be minimized or stolen when there wasn't a clear paper trail. One of the most satisfying aspects of my new role was mentoring younger employees, particularly women who were just starting their careers. I thought often about how different my experience might have been if I had waited longer to speak up, if I had continued to doubt my own perceptions instead of trusting the evidence. During a recent company-wide meeting, Janet Morrison had publicly recognized our department's improved performance and specifically highlighted the cultural changes we had implemented. The recognition felt good, but what felt even better was seeing my team members' faces light up when their contributions were acknowledged in front of the entire company. As I looked out my office window on this February afternoon, watching the river flow past the city's skyline, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The woman who had sat in Marcus's office feeling confused and diminished was gone, replaced by someone who understood her worth and wasn't afraid to advocate for herself and others. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Saw the article about Morrison and Associates in the Tribune business section. So proud of how far you've come." I looked up the article and found a piece about innovative workplace practices, featuring our company's new transparency initiatives and mentorship programs. It was gratifying to see that our internal changes were being recognized as industry best practices. That evening, as I packed up my things to head home, I thought about the advice I would give to someone facing a similar situation. The most important thing would be to trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right. Document everything. Seek out trusted advisors who can provide perspective. And remember that speaking up requires courage, but staying silent often requires even more courage because it means accepting a situation that you know is wrong. I had learned that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about doing the right thing when it's difficult, when the outcome is uncertain, and when you're not sure if anyone will believe you. As I walked through the lobby of Morrison & Associates, past the walls lined with awards and recognition, I felt a deep sense of belonging that had been missing during those months when I was questioning my own worth. This was my company now, in a way that it had never been before. I had helped make it better, and it had helped make me stronger. The Chicago winter was beginning to give way to spring, and with it came a sense of renewal and possibility. I had survived my first real test as a leader, both in terms of standing up for myself and in terms of managing a team through significant change. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I felt ready to face them with the confidence that comes from knowing you can trust yourself to do the right thing, even when it's hard. The elevator doors closed behind me as I headed home, and I smiled at my reflection in the polished metal doors. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight, I was content with how far I had come and excited about where I was going.